Good morning, everybody. It's Good Friday. The scripture reading is John chapter 18 and chapter 19. You can pause the video and read that at the link below on Bible Gateway or in your home Bible if you haven't done so already. I'll give you a minute to do that. If you're just joining us on the internet, since we've been on the internet the last couple of weeks, this is St. Andrew's, Roslin. I've been here 7 years, and when I first came, this was a 2-point charge. So we had a congregation here, and we had a congregation up the road in Tweed. And, we did 2 services on a Sunday in sort of different ways. It was really neat to be able to do the same service really in 2 completely different contexts and have it take on its own meaning and things like that as you moved 15 kilometers down the road. But over the summer, both congregations are small, and over the summer they decided to amalgamate. This was a hard decision, it was a long decision, and given that Roslin is an intersection town, there's no store, there's no offices, it's just an intersection on the highway. There's 3 churches here. And Tweed is sort of a hub of this area. I say hub loosely, but Tweed is also a small town, but it's considerably bigger than Roslin, and so we decided that that would be our base of operations. And so we're selling this building, and actually it has sold. It sold right at the beginning of COVID-19, which has presented some interesting challenges. And it closes at the end of the month. I'm not even sure that I'm supposed to be here, but I felt compelled to be when I turned out of the driveway to find a place to film today. And I actually came down here to do the Easter service. I thought we'll do, service, talk, whatever these are. I thought we'll do one last Easter at St. Andrew's, Roslin. But if you'll notice, this is not a picture of Easter. This is a picture of Good Friday. When you look at the Good Friday story, I see a perfect storm of human challenges and limitations and misunderstandings coming together at the perfect time. If you took one element away or changed the date or anything like that, I don't think Jesus would have died. But as far as the gospel is concerned, Jesus' death is important. When you look at the crowd, they had all these expectations of Jesus. They were putting their own needs and expectations onto Jesus rather than listening to what he was really about. And so it was easy for them to fall away, and it was easy for them to almost have a riot when Pilate gave them the choice between Jesus and Barabbas being released. When you look at the chief priests and the Pharisees and all that group, these were people that very much believed God was angry at them. And that was a different understanding in those days. If God was angry at you, that's why your crops failed. That's how they thought. And they thought because Rome was in charge in their land, they thought God was angry at them. And so they had worked for generations to bring the religion to where it was now. They thought if they followed the rules more closely, then God would be pleased with them and show them that pleasure. And Jesus was threatening to ruin that. He was coming in, looking at the same stories, but with a very different approach. So they were scared. They were very scared that Jesus was going to mess it all up. And then just the fact that this was happening during Passover week, the fact that Jesus was in Jerusalem when it was 3 times the size that it usually was. It was cheek to jowl of Israelite people who were upset that Rome was in charge, celebrating a cultural and religious holiday together. In other words, that was a powder keg. And here was Jesus in the city, from the religious perspective, threatening to blow up the whole Passover festival, which they would have seen as an affront to God and a major setback in all their efforts. God may have even punished them further. They were scared. It also would have had repercussions for Rome. Rome was a very interesting place, and this was sort of the strong time in Rome. You were allowed to be whoever you wanted to be in Rome. It was a cosmopolitan place, but you were not allowed to disrupt the peace. They kept the Roman peace at any cost. And so when it came to Pilate, when the chief priests and Pharisees thought that were upset and came to him and said, there's going to be a riot, and this was a riot that they were stoking, he had to shut that down. He gave Jesus every opportunity to get out of it, which Jesus did not take. But Pilate had to prevent a riot, and I don't think he liked what he did. I don't think Pilate is the villain that we say he is, or often think he is. He was a cog in a wheel, and stuck between a rock and a hard place that he tried to get out of. Anyway, Good Friday is all these things and more that combined to lead to Jesus' death. An innocent man died in a public and horrific way, simply because a bunch of people were scared. And a bunch of people were stuck and couldn't see what was actually happening, and just all those human things combined to kill Jesus. And, Good Friday is meant to be a bit of a downer in that, not a bit of a downer, it's meant to be a down story because it's meant to remind us of our limitations. It's meant to remind us that we don't understand, that we have worldly pressures that we have to work with, that we get scared, that we're fickle. It's there to remind us of all these things and what they do, hopefully so that we don't keep doing them, but we know that we will keep doing them. We know that's just how humanity works, and that we're limited people. But Good Friday is also there as a reminder that if we can recognize our problems and recognize our limitations and let go, then there can be new life. There could not be a resurrection without a death. There could not be Easter Sunday without Good Friday. And I think even Good Friday on its own can be a positive story. We need the resurrection, and I'll talk more about that on Sunday, but we can also look at Good Friday and say, here is someone who who was trying to change where the pendulum of power and rule and justice and everything was, but didn't add energy to that pendulum, did not contribute to injustice or friction or any of that in order to move the pendulum to a better place, which is what humans tend to do. Jesus walked willingly and openly to the cross so that we could see A, our challenges, and B, what happens when we decide to lead from vulnerability. I think if we didn't have the resurrection, I still think there would be Christians. I think there would be people that, and history's shown us that it works, who say the real path to true justice is justice for everybody and a perfect world is setting ourselves aside and setting our expectations aside, just like Jesus showed us. That's a black and white picture that Easter will bring to color and 3 dimensions and 4K and all. Easter takes that story and just multiplies it by 1,000. But Good Friday is a good news story, as hard as it is. And when I came in here to look at this place and do the Easter story, I realized this is not an Easter story. This is a picture of Good Friday. But I don't want this to be a sad picture of Good Friday. Good Friday is a melancholy day. It is a difficult day. But this is a picture of a group of people who were able to set aside their own hopes and expectations for this place to see where God was leading them. It became apparent to us that we simply couldn't continue in the way that we expected to continue. We have a great group of people in both churches that were both struggling on their own. And we've been worshiping together since early fall, and seeing the two communities come together has been just, from my perspective, been just phenomenal. But to do that, they had to let go. They had to do what Jesus did. Usually this light in front of you, usually that's a stained glass picture of Jesus, which has been moved up to Tweed, and we're going to give it a place of honor somewhere. We haven't worked out quite where yet. And it was jarring to come in and not see it. And perhaps for Good Friday, it's even more jarring to see that the fluorescent lights left over are a cross shape. It's a difficult message. This is a difficult place to be. It's probably the last time I'll be here. But it's a very special place to be. It's a very important place to be. And I'm sad that because of sort of the timeline and everything with COVID-19 that we're not going to get to do a closing service here. But it's very interesting that on Good Friday I ended up here without really planning on being. Amen.